I had been running the soup line at the Tenmark border camp for 11 years before the dragon came. And in all that time I had learned one thing that the relief workers with their clipboards never seemed to grasp. Hunger does not care what shape you are. It was near dusk on a cold spring evening when the thing came down out of the gray sky and crashed into the beyond the last row of tents. I heard it before I saw it, a sound like a wagon full of iron falling down a hill, then a long groan that rattled the tent poles. People screamed. Children were snatched up. Old Devrin, who ran the water cart, his bucket and ran so fast he left his boots in the mud. I did not run. I want to say it was courage, but it wasn't. My knees don't move the way they used to. And by the time I understood what everyone else already knew, that a dragon, a real dragon, deep violet and big as a freight hauler, had landed not 40 paces from my cook tent, there wasn't anywhere left to run to that 50 other people hadn't already filled. So I stood there with my ladle in my hand and I looked at it. It was on its side in the mud, wings half spread, and one of those wings was wrong. Bent backward at the joint, the membrane torn clean through in 2 places. Black blood crusted along a gash that ran from its shoulder down its ribs. Its scales, which should have shimmered like a held breath of twilight, were dull and caked with dust. Its eyes, and I will remember this until I die, were the same eyes my grandson got when the fever took him bad. That glassy, far-off look of something that has stopped fighting and started waiting. It wasn't snarling. It wasn't doing anything at all, except breathing, slow and ragged, each breath shuddering down its long body like a wave losing its strength before it reaches shore. "It's hunting," someone hissed from behind a tent flap. "Get the rifles." There weren't any rifles, not real ones, not anymore. Not since the supply lines got cut the winter before. There was a hunting bow, a few kitchen knives, and about 200 terrified people in canvas tents. I looked at the dragon, and the dragon, I am sure of this, looked back at me, not with menace, with the same dull, hopeless patience I'd seen on the faces of every refugee who'd ever come limping into this camp half-starved, asking without words whether anyone here had anything left to give. I went back into my tent, filled a bowl from the evening pot, barley, some salted goat, whatever vegetables hadn't gone soft yet, and I carried it out across the open ground. "Imik," that was Sarah, my niece, who helps me on the line. "Imik, get back here, that's a dragon." "I can see that it's a dragon," I said. "I'm not blind, I'm just old." I walked until I was maybe 10 paces off, close enough that I could feel heat coming off its body in waves, close enough to smell blood and char, and something underneath that, something almost sweet like rain on hot stone. Then I set the bowl down in the mud and stepped back. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the dragon's head, easily as big as my whole body, turned, slow as a door swinging on a rusted hinge, and one nostril flared, testing the air. Its eyes found the bowl, then they found me. It made a sound. Not a roar, a low, rough hum, almost a question, and then it dragged itself, wincing, an arm's length closer, and lowered its head and ate. It took the whole bowl in one careful motion, tongue moving like a cat's, and, when it was done, it looked up at me again. And this time there was something different in those eyes. Not gratitude exactly. I don't think dragons feel things the way we name them. But attention, like I had become in that moment, a thing worth watching. "Well," I said, mostly to myself because my voice was shaking more than I wanted it to, "I suppose you'll be wanting more of that." It stayed 3 days. Nobody else would go near it. Not at first. Though by the second day, a few of the braver children were peering around tent corners, and by the third, half the camp had crept close enough to stare from what they considered a safe distance, which still wasn't very far at all, because there is no safe distance from something the size of a barn. I tended the wing myself. I won't pretend I knew the right way to do it. I'd set goat's legs and stitched up a man's scalp once with a fishing line, and that was the whole of my medical training. But I packed the gash with the same salve we used on burns, clean cloth wrapped tight, and I kept the wound from going green, which is more than some field hospitals manage. The dragon held still for it, held still the way a big animal holds, still when it has decided, against every instinct, to trust the small thing fussing at its side. On the second night it rained, and I dragged a tarp out and rigged it over the worst of the torn wing and the dragon. I had started calling him Vale by then, for no reason except that the name came to me while I was stirring the pot, and it seemed to fit the low hum he made. Vale shifted his bulk, ever so carefully, so that the tarp caught the rain instead of his wound, so that I wouldn't have to keep coming back out into the storm to fix it. That was when I knew there was someone in there, not a beast. Someone. On the morning of the fourth day, the sky over the camp went dark, not with storm clouds but with wings. Dozens of them, descending in slow spirals, each one as large as Vale or larger scales, catching the early light in shades of violet and deep blue and a kind of burnished gold that hurt to look. Directly, the whole camp froze. I heard Sarah, somewhere behind me, start praying in a language I didn't know she remembered. The lead dragon, older, scarred along one flank with eyes like banked coals, landed at the edge of the camp and folded its wings with a sound like a sail coming down, and it looked past all of us, past the tents straight at Vale, lying in the mud with his wing bound in clean cloth and a bowl licked empty beside him. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the old dragon lowered its great head, slow and deliberate, until its eyes were level with mine. It didn't speak, not in words, but I felt something pass through the air between us, heavy as a held breath, and I understood, the way you understand weather coming, that this creature had expected to find a corpse. Had flown a long way expecting to find a corpse, and a camp of frightened people standing over the bones of something they'd killed out of fear. Instead it found a torn wing wrapped in clean cloth, and an old woman with a ladle, and a scout who was still breathing. It didn't kneel. None of them did, and I'm glad of that, because I would not have known what to do with 200 dragons kneeling in the mud, and I don't think the camp's tent poles could have survived the wind off that many wings folding at once. What it did instead was simpler, and it has stayed with me longer than any grand gesture could have. It reached with one taloned foot, gentle as a hand cupping an egg. It set down beside my cook tent a sealed cask the size of a barrel. Then another dragon did the same, and another. Grain, dried meat, something that smelled like medicine, bolts of cloth heavier and finer than anything the relief trucks had ever brought us. Then they helped Vale up, carefully, 4 of them bearing his weight between them, and they rose together into the gray morning sky, and were gone. They came back every season after that. Not to conquer anything, not to be worshipped, just a handful of dragons, gliding low over the camp once a season, setting down supplies at the edge of the tents before flying on. Relief workers never could explain it in their reports. I never tried to. I'm an old woman now, and my knees are worse. And Sarah runs the soup line mostly by herself these days. But I still come out most evenings to stir the pot, and sometimes, when the light goes long and gold across the waste, I hear that sound again. Wagons full of iron, falling soft this time, settling onto the scrub beyond the tents. I don't run. I never did, not really. I just go on stirring, and I wait to see who's hungry.